on the national stage. Since bursting onto the scene in the WNBA in 2024 after a historic career at Iowa in college, Clark has been mercilessly attacked in the media and, more importantly, on the court. It seems every week there is a new video of Clark being violently singled out by her opponents who have thrown her to the ground, poked her in the eyes, hit her in the back and neck, you name it. But the WNBA has taken little action to protect their new star. And now there are members of Congress calling for that to change. We're joined now by one of those lawmakers, Congressman Marlin Stutzman from Indiana, home of the Indiana Fever, where Clark plays. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be with you this afternoon. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I am a big fan of Caitlin Clark. I never thought that I would say that because historically I've not cared about women's basketball, but seeing what she does, it's incredible. And as you have pointed out, there's no protection for her despite these attacks against her on almost a nightly basis. So you sent a letter to the WNBA commissioner. Tell us what you said in that letter.
Yeah, so we, as a group with the Republican Study Committee, which is a group of conservatives in Congress, sent a letter together with our chairman, August Pfluger, leading on that letter and saying to the WNBA commissioner that they need to look out for every player, but particularly in this case, Caitlin Clark. Caitlin is the Michael Jordan for the WNBA. I grew up watching the NBA. Michael Jordan was my favorite player. And, not that the referees need to give them favoritism, but they need to be sure that they're protected on the court. They don't want them having an injury. Caitlin actually had an injury last year that kept her off the floor for several games and was out most of the season. So she's healthy, she's back. But I'll tell you what, if the WNBA thinks that they hit a home run here by themselves, they didn't. This was Caitlin Clark who came in and she drains threes like you mentioned. She has brought a whole new excitement and attention to the WNBA. She started this even at Iowa when she played for the Hawkeyes in her NCAA career. But just this last week, one of her opposition players, while she's on the ground, vulnerable, she's already in a spot where she could be hurt. Somebody stepped on her. One of the opposing players puts her fist into her neck, and you can tell it was blatant, like she wanted to try to hurt her without it being noticed. And the referees didn't even call a foul, and then they did go back and suspend the player for one game. But they need to protect every player, but they specifically need to not let this targeting continue against Caitlin Clark because of what I think is egos and maybe even some racism in this case.
Yeah, I have to ask about the race element here. And I hate even throwing out the race thing because, we get enough of that in culture. But I can't help also but see a lot of the comments from WNBA commentators going after her because she's a white girl, and we've seen a lot of the vitriol thrown her way. What sort of role do you think race is playing here?
Well, you know what? Like you said, I hope that that's not what it is. But I'll tell you, you know what? She's such a great player. I mean, she's phenomenal. And the Indiana Fever have built up a great team around her. And, Sophie Cunningham, which is another, phenomenal player, has come in and kind of has been the defender for Caitlin Clark. But they've got a remarkable team. And you know what? There's black, white girls on the team, and they play together as a team within the Fever. And so, I'm sure there's a lot of jealousy coming from the other teams, the other players. But I do suspect that even some of this is racism because of some of the comments that other WNBA players have made. Dawn Staley, she's one of the bigger faces in the WNBA. She's made comments that just really bother me that, somehow that white girls, shouldn't be playing in this sport or, somehow that they're not, there's some sort of difference. Well, there's not. I mean, this is a competitive sport and it needs to be protected. And the referees, especially in the WNBA, need to make sure that all of their players are safe, but especially Caitlin Clark. I mean, this is just getting out of hand where she could be hurt because of somebody's just trying to take it out on her.
Yeah, and we've seen a number of folks in the league and commentating on the league saying that this is an example of white privilege and that she somehow had an easier go of things getting to the league. But moving on from that front, Congressman, I'm sure you're aware that there are people who have responded. If you go look at the comment sections as I did today on this story, there are people saying, Why does this require intervention from Congress? So what's your response to someone who says, hey, do we really need our lawmakers intervening in a sports league?
Well, you know what? We represent our constituents. I represent Northeast Indiana. I have a lot of fans of the Indiana Fever. And, this is a workplace environment, first of all. Yes, it's entertainment, it's basketball, it's a sport. But these players, this is their job. They sign contracts for paychecks to be out on the court playing. And, just like in any other business, or out on the construction site or out on the farm or, in our schools, firehouses, wherever are people that are working and it's an unsafe environment. If somebody would have fallen on the floor out on a construction site and somebody else, kneels down and pushes somebody in the throat, they would have been charged with harassment or assault in some cases. And so I think that's why this matters. It's why it matters to me, because I want to be sure that, first of all, that the players are safe in the WNBA. And we've already seen this hatred towards Caitlin Clark, whether it's between Angel Reese and Caitlin, which is a rivalry. That's a good rivalry that could really be built on rather than, somehow letting it getting out of control where it's just an ugly fight. It doesn't have to be that. It could be a good competitive a rivalry rather than something ugly. So I think that's why it matters to me and to my colleagues, and it does matter to our constituents because they want to see the best talent out on the floor playing competitive basketball.
While on the topic of protecting athletes who are being attacked, in the NBA, I'm a Washington Wizards fan, and they have been just brutally beaten time and time again on the court. Can you please step in and intervene and protect my team? There's been no violence, but they've just gotten beaten. So if you could just do something to help me on that front, I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas.
Michael Jordan was even there to help, and it didn't help then. Yeah. So I don't know what, because
if MJ can't save your franchise, there's no hope for you. I want to jump across back to D.C. And get your take on just a wild story. The Trump administration just released a new report highlighting ways in which the Biden administration pushed woke ideologies in various Smithsonian museums. There were transgender displays with drag queens and crotch harnesses and chest binders, diaries from gender-confused girls. And on top of all that, we know the anti-white exhibits that trash the founding fathers. The list goes on. So what are your thoughts on this report showing what was happening at the Smithsonian?
Well, first of all, I'm glad the report was released and that the American people can see what certain people are doing in our nation's capital. As we're celebrating America 250 this year, I mean, thank God that President Trump and Republicans are in charge of America 250, because instead of it being red, white, and blue, we'd be pushed with rainbow colors all over us. Because that's who they are. That's what they are. And, that's not the way it needs to be. Look, if you want to be gay or straight, that's fine. That's what you can do in America. But you don't have to, our government doesn't have to be pushing it down people's throats. And I think that's what they were doing at the Smithsonian, and, how they were displaying history. And they should be focusing on it from a broad perspective and people's accomplishments in the sense of building cars or building spaceships or building, a business that changes the way the world, is able to handle healthcare issues. There's so many things that bring people together and unify us as a country. They're focusing on transgender ideology and the sexual orientation that many of us we don't need to know. It's too much information, and it's not something that the federal government or any government for that matter should be pushing upon the citizens of its country. Let's focus on the accomplishments of what happens outside in our communities rather than focusing on drag queens.
Congressman, we have one more minute, but on this topic, do you believe there's any action that Congress can or should take to ensure that this sort of thing, this anti-American rhetoric in many ways, is not something that's being pushed in museums like this?
Well, you know what? That's a great question. And sadly, I think with the way, the Republican and Democrat numbers are right now in Congress, I don't know that we could get any Democrat support to stop this sort of woke aggression in our public institutions. So I would say that Congress should do something, But unfortunately, the Democrat Party, unless we can find a couple of Democrats that would say, you know what, this is not the place for it. Leave it out of the front, the eyes of children and families that are visiting our nation's capital. But I know Republicans would. Democrats are in a very different place right now as a party.
And one final question, just before I let you go, I have to ask you, we've been talking a lot about the SAVE Act that's going on in Congress. We're about to have Senator Tim Scott on. I want to ask him about that. It's made its way through the House. It's stalling in the Senate. What is your message to your colleagues over in the Senate about getting the Save America Act through?
Well, just like of all the issues that we're talking about, we need common sense, conservatism. We need, even if like the Bill Maher's on the left, they're at least using some common sense about what should be happening out on the basketball court or in the girls' locker rooms. But the SAVE Act is what's going to determine the elections. And, the policy can't happen until you have the right people in place. And when you have cheaters in California or Michigan or in Illinois, New York, that have an advantage from, for one, just the illegals that they count in the census gives the Democrat states more districts. But two, we need to be sure that illegals don't vote and that we protect the integrity of our election process. And there's 4 senators over there, Murkowski, Collins, Tillis, and Mitch McConnell, that if they would vote yes, we could get this passed. Yeah. But those 4 are the ones holding it up. I hope they come to their senses.
I think a lot of voters do as well. Congressman, thank you for joining us and jumping all over the place. We covered a lot. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Great to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Congressman.